So why is the Earth's core like this, a pineapple core like this, the human core like this, and Ben and Jerry's core like this? It seems like they're being defined differently upon first glance. One is like a tube that goes through the whole thing, and one is, the innermost point. What is the core? Well, the reason the Earth's core is this kind of dot in the center, the innermost point, and a pineapple's core is this vertical thing, is one wrong? Is one of these definitions of core incorrect? They're both correct because these two things are subject to different gravitational fields. And this is easier to understand than that sounds, but it sounds cool to use that word, gravitational field. The Earth has gravity hits the Earth perpendicular at any given point. So if you take a sphere and you put a tangent plane to it, it's a flat plane, will always be tangent, and then the perpendicular direction relative to this is how gravity hits the Earth at any point, like a tree or a light pole or anything, just this vertical vector. And this is how pineapples are oriented. They're oriented vertically. I think that's fair to say, for the sake of this gentle argument, at least. The gravitational field of the entire planet as an entity, this perpendicular thing that's hitting the Earth is hitting it at every single point. So the gravitational force is spherical in nature. It's like coming in and holding the Earth in perfect equilibrium to the rest of the universe. But basically, it's a spherical force coming at it from all direction. And so, obviously, if you take the Earth's core and you try to make it like the pineapple, like a tube that goes through it, that doesn't make sense because you could put the tube anywhere, that has the diameter of this sphere, um, and call that the core, which doesn't make sense. Um, and so for a sphere, the core is this center point. Now, are we more like the pineapple or more like the Earth in terms of our orientation? We are vertically oriented species. This is pretty clear, right? When you're walking, sitting, um, we're taller than we are long. And so, why are we defining our core, in the fitness field, in the PT world? The way most people think of the core is kind of just like the deep musculature or whatever, the deep stuff that's in this part of the body is how the core is most often defined. Even I asked ChatGPT, how do you define the core? The stuff that stabilizes the spine and pelvis is kind of what it said. Well, that seems like an arbitrary definition to call the core the thing that stabilizes the pelvis and spine. I'm not saying the stuff in here isn't important, it is, but when it comes to using that word core, I think that's an incorrect usage because we're oriented vertically. Our core is more like this pineapple core, the Ben and Jerry's core. And I want to clarify again, the reason I think it's fair to define the core in a different way for a different thing, and as the innermost point for the sphere and as this tube for the vertically oriented, is because of the gravity that we're subject to. The gravity that we are subject to at any given moment is vertical because we only consume this small portion of the Earth that has this vertical orientation of gravity coming through it. If we were the size of half the planet, then it would be a different story because there's different gravitational force vectors. We're only getting this vertical one. the earth is getting spherical. But at the same time, we're not always oriented vertically. That's a common thing. We've evolved to be that way. Um, Relatively recently, when it comes to the history of the earth, but we also lay down. At night, we change our orientation from being vertical to horizontal. And when you're horizontal, you're needing to work minimally to be able to exist in relation to gravity, and to both relation to gravity and the earth. You can't move very well. You can't move very well, but you can exist with minimal effort. And so as our orientation changes, the core changes. Now the core, and this took me a few minutes, this is kind of a brain teaser to think through of what is the core when you're laying down, as it relates to the earth and gravity. Gravity remains this perpendicular force, but we are now horizontal. And so I think it's something like like a circle that would go through us height wise. But it wouldn't include, the sides here, and it would include the skin on the front and back. So it's this something like that, I would say, is the core. And so if you're going to define your core existentially speaking, it's almost like a time-weighted average. Your functional core, the one that allows you to move, is vertically oriented. Ignore anatomy. This is just pure... Anatomy is not really what is. Anatomy means to cut up. It's a way to reduce things into something that helps us try to understand it more, but don't mistake the finger for the moon. So the core is just like a broomstick or something, whatever size you want to define it as, that goes through us, head all the way down to standing, to our feet. That's our functional core. Sleeping, it's this other thing that's in the center. So our core is almost like if you want to define it, it's different at different times. But thinking of the core as this vertical is going to really, it allows you to use the word core in a more pure way, in a more holistic way. To understand what you fundamentally are, what and who you fundamentally are, and how you can navigate the world with maximized efficiency. Thinking of your core as just this deep stuff in here, that's the stuff that stabilizes the spine and pelvis from an anatomical perspective. Your spine and pelvis aren't going to be secure if your feet aren't on the ground, or if you're not connected to the ground, but people don't think of the feet as the core. So even that word through ChatGPT, the stuff that stabilizes the pelvis and spine. So I asked it, I was like, well, what about your adductors? Like, technically your adductors are allowing it, the spine and pelvis are sitting on top of them. I was like, would these, and they're deep, I was like, would these be included in the core? They're like, no, these aren't included in the core. And I argued with ChatGPT for a few minutes. Sometimes you can win those arguments, a lot of the time. Sometimes it's just wrong, and it will, if you correct it, it will be like, oh yeah, I was wrong, sorry. But it wouldn't budge on this, because the core in this fitness, PT, whatever world, the health world, is just arbitrarily defined to some extent as being this stuff in here. But it's the wrong orientation. We're not considering the orientation of what we are. So rethink what your core is. I'm a rolfer. I do structural integration. Ida Rolf, Dr. Ida Rolf, the badass woman from the Bronx that came up with this structural integration work, nearly 70, 80 years ago, something like that. She understood this, and she got great results through understanding it. as you come to be able to sense your core, to be able to, even if you don't like the verbiage, even if you're not concerned with the verbiage, but if you're able to sense this verticality that's in the center of us, you'll start to know yourself a lot better. You'll start to become confident. Confidence is directly related to your ability. I'm going to make another video. I'm going to make a different video on confidence, because it's directly tied to this and it's easy to understand, but I'll save it for next time.